We're going to go ahead and talk to our next person. We got Riccardo calling in from Italy. Riccardo, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hi there. Everything's fine here. So, I wanted to talk about a really fun interaction I had with a believer. I'm an atheist, by the way.
Cool.
And so this was the best interaction I ever had about theology with someone whom I disagree with. And just for a premise, we have been classmates for 4 years, so we already knew each other. Well, we aren't currently. We are no longer classmates, so he wasn't, let's say, forced to be nice to me. But it was good. We were both interested in finding the truth, and so we thought that one of us must be closer to it. So, sorry. A discussion can only be mutually beneficial.
Yeah, sure. So I see that, according to the call screener here, you had a conversation with him regarding the Shroud of Turin, which is always a funny topic. So tell me how that went.
That wasn't really the primary point of our discussion, even because I knew that was coming because we have been to a Catholic school, and that's something that has been told over the years multiple times. But I've never did my homework and looked really too much into it. So I was just thinking about calling you to copy from yours. And yes, that was just the only point that at the moment I couldn't respond to. So that's why I'm here.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk about the Shroud of Turin. Richard, are you familiar with the Shroud of Turin?
I am familiar with the Shroud of Turin, and I'm also familiar with the act in the Middle Ages and coming up just before the Reformation of pilgrimage. Christian pilgrimage in Europe, and how it was big business.
Yes. So, let's talk about the Catholic Church for a second here, okay? If you were like me and you grew up as a Protestant in the United States, you may not know much about the Catholic Church and how it works. It's a little bit different than the rest of us, right? Catholics are really funny about their history. They talk a lot about saints, they talk a lot about these miracles that happen, and they also have a lot of sacred relics that they talk about. In fact, multiple sacred relics, sometimes of the same thing. Like people will claim they have the foreskin of Jesus, for example, or part of the spear that pierced Jesus's side, right? Like there's all kinds of these little kinds of, I don't know, trinkets that get touted as, hey, this is the real deal. Pretty much every single time they've ever done analysis of this stuff.
Sorry, Dan, I need to interrupt you regarding the foreskin of Jesus, because there were several foreskins of Jesus hanging around.
There's more than one, which is like, what does that mean? Right? Is he like, I don't know, I know it's big in the Jewish community to like do that. Does that mean he's like becomes extra Jewish if you get it cut off multiple times? I don't know what that means. I don't know how that works. But anyway, so that's the thing. And the Shroud of Turin is one of these things, right? I don't know the exact history as to why it got as popular as it did. I think it's because there were some groups claiming that, oh no, this is actually legit, because they did some tests on it and it was like, no, this is a real thing. But then other tests were done on it. Specifically, they tested flower pollen on that stuff. I remember that. They tested for any like blood stains and things like that. And they dated the Shroud of Turin to about the middle of like the 14th century, I think is what it was, something like that, right? Like as a medieval artifact. And of course, it can't be a medieval artifact if it's supposed to be, the Shroud of Turin. It's supposed to be the thing that covered Jesus while he was in the tomb. And it's not. Like, all these dating methods have shown otherwise. So if you are arguing with somebody about the Shroud of Turin being legit, just look up the Wikipedia article on this thing. I know I've seen it before. There's all kinds of stuff where they talk about the testing for it. And you can also say, oh, which one? Because there's been multiple Shrouds of Turin that have been put around, but there is one in particular that people like to talk about. So yeah, I mean, it's bullshit, just like every other of the relics that they say is real. I mean, we're talking about an event in history that we don't even know where it happened. We don't know exactly what time it happened at, and we don't know about where any of the people that were there, where they gone to, and where their stuff's at. So that's why when you go to Jerusalem, you're gonna see like multiple tomb sites and multiple places where Jesus was supposedly baptized in the River Jordan. Like there's a whole tourism industry that's based on this stuff, and the Shroud of Turin is just like one of those things supporting that industry. It really is. Anyway, that's a lot of information there, Ricardo. Did you get all that?
Yes. But okay, I already knew about the carbon dating. That was something, I think it was done in the 80s. But at least in Italy, being not very popular, but it's popular. There are mainly, the carbon dating is contested because the sample has been taken from a corner that was damaged and has been repaired, and also it wasn't handled properly like you would expect from a normal archaeological item. It was passed around many times during the Middle Ages, especially, and all of that. So the carbon dating, from what I can see, at least, seems to not be legit. That one from the 1980s.
Let's say you're not convinced. Ricardo. Let's say you're not convinced by the carbon dating. What about the flower pollen dating? What about the tests for bloodstains? What about? I mean, like I just pulled up the Wikipedia article now. They were doing chemical reactions on this stuff to see how old this stuff was. I mean, carbon dating, I think, was done, but it's just one of many methods that were used on this thing, right? It's we don't have to look at just one particular source. I mean, this was something that was so interesting. I guess it was interesting to people because it said it had Jesus's face on it, right? Like that was the claim. You could see Jesus's face. So maybe that's why it got more popular. But
yeah,
there's more than one method here than just the carbon dating, right?
Yeah, I know that the carbon dating is being contested, and the very big thing about it is that they say that the only way they have managed to replicate an image like that is by using a UV light at millions of watts. That's the only thing that seems to make it somewhat legit. But for now, I've only searched for Christian sources, and I'm familiar with those, but not much with the...
Riccardo, what is the actual evidence your friend is suggesting that it is the Turin Shroud?
Yeah.
Is there something in particular rather than it just being...
I don't believe it is. I must...
Yeah, but your friend, what's your friend saying? Why does your friend believe it?
It's not really that they do believe it. Even one of my professor, who was in a documentary that, from what he has said, has been transmitted, I think, in South America, and has been seen by millions of people. He was there as an expert of the Gospels, not for the Sindon. Sindon is the Italian name. The Turin Shroud. He said, "Well, okay, I don't know if that's real, but it seems to be. But I don't really care. The only reason I care about this is that." I don't know how that could have been done. I know that I don't think it's by divine intervention, but I don't know. I was just curious to know if you know something about the the UV light argument, and there is a counter argument for that.
There are people that say that the countenance of Jesus, right, his face, like actually radiated to the point where that radiation, I don't know how they describe the radiation, but that something about the radiation came from Jesus and left that face mark. And I think that's what you're talking
Exactly.
about, right? And that's what they pick out. Yeah. Again, like, it could be anything, right? Like, there's already so many things that are suspect with all these relics, so you have to be very careful when looking at this stuff. I don't have to. I really don't have to think I have to propose an explanation as to why you see some of the material on there in order for me to also simultaneously make the claim that it's probably not from Jesus of Nazareth, right? Like, that's like one of many, many different possibilities. And if we have enough evidence saying that that's not the best explanation, I don't think I should just settle and say, well, we don't know. I guess we should settle for this explanation for it, right? Like, I think there's enough room to doubt to say that it could be other things. Now, I'll be honest with you. I haven't thought about the Shroud of Turin in a long time. I don't really know what I would say, what I think it is, but I'm sure some other people have thought it through and have given a good response. And again, I realize too, I'm looking at the English language Wikipedia, so it may not come up the same way if you look it up in Italian. But like, I'm literally seeing like 10 different methods of how they've dated this thing, and none of them have really shown any conclusion that this would come from Jesus. And it would be weird if he did, honestly. It's really strange how a lot of this stuff kind of turns out. But that's my thoughts on it. What do you think, Richard?
Yeah, one of the things to remember, Riccardo, is that when a claim is being made about something, especially a specific object, the claim shouldn't be made with, well, what about this? What about this? What about this in mind? The claim is, if you're claiming that it's a shroud from Jesus, the evidence should be presented that it is a shroud from Jesus.
Yeah.
And when you talk to a lot of people who believe in the Turin shrouds, that is never presented. What is presented is, well, how do you explain this? Well, how do you explain this? Well, how do you explain the image? How do you explain the carbon dating? That's irrelevant. The claim being made is, this is the shroud from Jesus. So where is the evidence for that? And those are the questions we should be asking. We shouldn't have to go out and debunk something that there is no evidence for to begin with. Once you've presented the evidence, then we can examine the evidence. But just this is a shroud that covered Jesus is not evidence. That's the claim.
Right. Imagine, like, if another religious group, right, comes and said, actually, this is the shroud that covered our Lord and Savior for our religious group. We don't have to suddenly think of, oh, well, is this the most likely explanation because this group of people is claiming for it to be, right? We don't have to go that way. People can throw out claims and observations all they want. We just have to look at what we know about this thing. What we do know about this thing is that it definitely isn't from the times of ancient Judea, right? Like, it's not 2,000 years old. I think every single study that's ever been done on this that has been honest has concluded that. So the possibility of it being Jesus should be ruled out just by that, unless, Jesus manipulated the Shroud of Turin in such a way to that scientific, inquiry would not lend it to be 2,000 years old. But that seems very odd and very specific, and also kind of against Jesus' whole deal.
Oh, looks like we've lost Dan.
Hey, Richard,
you're left with me, I'm afraid, Riccardo.
Sorry,
anyway, Riccardo, that was a lot. What do you think?
For a second. Well, I think, I don't believe it, obviously, and I reject it, but I was just curious because, yes, you don't really need to debunk it they need to first show you that valuable evidence that it can be from Jesus. But the more arguments you have against it, the more maybe you could instigate some doubts in that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
what we
you're right,
should do,
Ricardo.
Ricardo, is look at what we do know. And what we do know is that there was an extensive trade in relics in the Middle Ages. People went
Mhm.
all over to see things, whether it was you know the alleged foreskins of Jesus. Who, by the way, I've got to come back to this point because I wanted to make this earlier and I didn't get a chance. So there were two.
A
There were
joke
two.
my mother said once. Sorry. A joke
there
my
were two,
mother said one day, looking at a collection of relics in our church, is that the pastors are exchanging relics like baseball cards, basically.
That's one way to put it.
And that should be enough to tell you that there's, if somebody's making a claim at the time, and this was going on for hundreds of years at the time when so many people were claiming so many relics and there were so many duplicates of these relics, that you don't just take as standard that these are all true. You need to have some kind of evidence to suggest, well, this is actually an authentic thing. This is an authentic Turin shroud. This is an authentic head covering of Jesus. This is an authentic foreskin of Jesus. And you've got to, you need that evidence. You can't just make the claim. Anybody can make the claim.
Yeah, if anything, it should make you more skeptical, right? Because of how many things have proven to be not true, or at least demonstrated to be suspect. But anyway, Ricardo, I know you're on our side. I know you're looking for just ways to talk to your friend about this stuff. So, I mean, that's what I would go with. I would counter with, look, what you've proposed is just one possible explanation, right? There are lots of explanations, some of which we may not have access to or could even talk about. But we need to talk about whether or not this is the most reasonable one. And I don't think it is. But there's a lot of people that have obviously looked into this, people with high scientific credentials who are like, yeah, no, this isn't real. And I'm just going to go with that. I'm not going to go and just say, oh, well, the shroud thing sounds like it's, yeah, that looks like Jesus's face. I don't know. I don't know if it works like that. But anyway, Ricardo, we got to let you go. We got to talk to some other people. But thanks so much for calling in. Ricardo has called in before, and he's like, I don't know, he's the only caller I've had from Italy, and I just think that's kind of neat. That's a very particular country that we have not had correspondence with, and now Ricardo's like our Italian guy. He's our Italian guy that calls in, and that's cool. I like it.